So welcome to all, and thank you for joining this COP30 One Health debrief. The idea was like to have like a feedback after the Belém negotiation, also on a point of view of health and One Health. So we have some guests that today are gonna unleash a little bit what's happening there in the 2 weeks of Belém. First of all, I want to start to say that we are very happy because as International One Health Conference, we had the opportunity to present our position paper and also have some side event regarding that. Of course, you can follow everything on the YouTube because we recorded the session in case you missed it. But anyway, now I want to give the floor to our speaker. First of all, I'm really pleased and thankful to have with us Jess Bagley, that is coordinating the Health Working Group and the Global Climate Health Alliance. So, Jess, thank you very much for being with us. I'll give you the floor to start a little bit with an overview on what's happened, also on the point of view of health topics on the Belém negotiation.
Thanks so much, Domenico, and thanks everybody for making time at the end of the year when I'm sure it's tempting to be on holiday. Um, to give a bit of context for what we were heading into COP30 with, it's the first ever COP that's been held in the Amazon, so certainly bringing home a lot of the wider One Health context. Geopolitics have really been shifting in the past few years, and the fact that the US has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement has certainly not made any of this any easier. 2024 was the first year that we at least temporarily surpassed the 1.5 degree limit, the lower bound of what's in the Paris Agreement. And we know that the international finance landscape is extremely challenging, especially coming out of COP29, where developing countries had requested 1.3 trillion US dollars from developed countries, and developed countries committed to provide and mobilize. So that's some provision directly from developed countries and some relying on the private sector, a much lower total of just 300 billion, so about a quarter of what was requested. Um, this and everything else has raised a lot of questions regarding the effectiveness of multilateralism. Some examples of proposals that have been circulated for UNFCCC reform are around things like whether we should move to voting rather than consensus-based decision making, and regulation to manage conflict of interest. Just to give a flavour of that, there are over 1,600 fossil fuel industry representatives, but we know the conflict of interest issue, of course, extends a lot more broadly to agribusinesses and plastics and beyond. So what do we need from COP30 for health? Climate change is acknowledged, including by WHO and the Lancet Countdown, to be a leading threat to the health of people everywhere. So it stands to reason that in order to protect health, ambitious climate decision making and action is vital, and health can be leveraged to support the sorts of ambitious climate outcomes that we need, whether or not those outcomes explicitly mention health. If they're ambitious, they're going to be good for health. And of course, the health gains of those decisions can also be optimized to make sure that the gains for health are as high as possible. We really hope, therefore, that COP30 would deliver accelerated adaptation, both in health and health determining sectors. There was a lot of calls for a just and equitable transition away from fossil fuels, and for increased climate finance, which is necessary both for action in the healthcare sector, but in other sectors like agriculture and sanitation that do determine health. In terms of some of the outcomes that weren't negotiated, so a lot of what happens at COP is negotiated, but there's also the action agenda where new initiatives and pledges are announced. So the Belém Health Action Plan, which really continues the work of the COP28 Declaration on Climate and Health, but with a specific focus on the implementation of adaptation actions for health, was launched and endorsed by over 30 countries and 50 organizations. The Climate and Health Funders Coalition has committed 300 million US dollars to support the implementation of that plan. And there's a special report on climate and health that was launched and that provides a lot of the evidence underpinning the actions that are included in the plan. Beyond the Belém Health Action Plan, 9 countries pledged new action on carbon, which of course provides a particular opportunity for health and for climate, given that black carbon is a short-lived climate forcer with a very intense warming effect over a short period of time, but also pollutes health. So measures to address black carbon, very good for climate in the short term and very good for health. There was also a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels. A process to develop that roadmap was launched by the Brazilian presidency at the very end of COP30. But clarity on what that process will look like and what the plan will contain is yet to be decided. The Mutarao decision was the overarching COP decision that picked up a lot of orphan issues that didn't have their own agenda item negotiation track. There's some content in it on NDCs, recognizing that NDCs fall short of what is required by the Paris Agreement in terms of reducing emissions. And there are a number of global implementation accelerator sessions that will be conducted by the COP30 presidency and the COP31 presidency at SB64, which is the meeting in Bonn in June that happens every year. And there'll also be a report on the Belém mission to 1.5 that will be produced in time for COP31 by the presidencies of COP29, COP30, and COP31. Details on those two initiatives are pretty scarce. At the moment, they both came out of COP30. There'll need to be some work that goes into deciding exactly what they both are. Finance is covered in the Mutarao decision, but I'll unpack it a bit later, along with some other finance outcomes. On trade, there's been a lot of concern from developing countries that the carbon border adjustment mechanisms that are put in place by developed countries will inhibit their own right to development. So that's in developing countries. And there will be a series of dialogues on how to enhance international cooperation related to the role of trade at that Bonn meeting next year, as well as in 2027 and 2028. There was varied support for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and varying pushback across different negotiator streams. The language that we saw on the IPCC and the Mutarao decision was probably the strongest. And that language is that the best available science for effective climate action and policymaking is provided by the IPCC. So not undermining it, but also not limiting that best available science to the IPCC alone. So really important to look out for what kinds of other sources different actors are pushing for to be considered. Of course, we need community science. We probably don't need the sort of science that's produced by the fossil fuel industry. On adaptation, the hope for COP30 was that a series of indicators that have been developed by experts over the last 2 years would be adopted to give a bit of a snapshot of the timeline of the global goal on adaptation. The global goal on adaptation is mentioned in the Paris Agreement. The discussion was then revived around the time of COP26, and a 2-year work program was launched to flesh out exactly what this goal meant. The Alliance of Small Island States really championed a well-being framing for the global goal on adaptation and included health as part of that. So there is a health target. And the 2 years from COP28 to COP30 have been looking into the indicators that will track progress towards each of those targets, so including health. There was quite a lot of pushback from countries on what that indicator list looked like and what would be required to track it. And there was concern from developing countries that that's a lot of additional work to track 100 new indicators, and there weren't additional resources being provided for that work. And there was also some resistance from some countries that felt like some of the indicators were more attuned to loss and damage than to adaptation. So these and other concerns led the Brazilian presidency to develop its own list of indicators that was sort of inspired by the list that the experts had proposed, but tried to address some of those concerns by different parties. And the 59 indicators that they came out with are phrased differently to respond to some of those concerns, but are really challenging to measure. So if you follow the link to that Global Goal on Adaptation text after the webinar, you'll be able to look at the list of indicators at the very end of it. And there are suggestions in the proposed list that we should be tracking climate attributable health impacts that can't currently be done. And that we should also be tracking the change in impact and attributing that to adaptation, which currently also can't be done. Um, the good news is that there are means of implementation indicators included on finance and technology transfer and capacity building, and that had been something that was really challenging to get in the lead up to COP30. And it's important to recognize that even if we did have technically perfect health indicators, unless we're tracking finance and technology transfer and capacity building, it won't be possible to show any progress on those indicators. There is a lack of clarity about what happens next on the methodology, given that a lot of those health indicators aren't operationalizable at the moment. And different parts of the decision text seem to imply slightly different things. So perhaps reflecting a last minute decision there. The text does define the next 2 year work program, lots of 2 year work programs under the Global Goal and Adaptation process. And there will be a 2 year Baku adaptation roadmap with 2 sessions a year from 2026 to 2028. Actually, that's 3 years, isn't it? But it will align adaptation action with adequate adaptation responses, strengthen implementation of the targets, enhance knowledge sharing, and ensure access to some of that means of implementation. Again, finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. If anyone wants to feed into what that Baku adaptation roadmap looks like, there is a submission opportunity by the 28th of February. On the mitigation work program, this is an opportunity to operationalize the outcomes of the global stocktake, or at least it could have been. There's one particular paragraph of the global stocktake decision that was adopted back at COP28 in Dubai that talks about a just and equitable transition away from fossil fuels. It calls for that transition, but it doesn't detail how on earth it's going to be implemented and what the next steps might look like. Ideally, this would have been picked up in the mitigation work program, but this has really been a red line for some countries and it's inhibited it being taken up. The decision that was eventually taken in the mitigation work program is non-prescriptive. There aren't any health mentions, although there were some health mentions in a draft around the public health benefits of methane mitigation and of waste management that emerged from some of the dialogues on the mitigation work program earlier in the year. Those dialogues are on waste and on forestry. As a result of those previous sort of sectoral dialogues and the lack of willingness to take up fossil fuel phase out and a just transition away from fossil fuels in the COP negotiations themselves, Colombia proposed that a future dialogue could talk about energy transitions, but there was really strong opposition from this from the Arab group, from like-minded developing countries, from Russia and from China. If anyone would like to support that, again, there is a submission opportunity by the 1st of February, so we could make the health case for why one of those future dialogues could be on fossil fuel phase out. On just transition, so reducing emissions while also building resilience, there were some really fantastic health mentions in the document that came out of the Just Transition Work Programme negotiations, including recognition of the right to health and to a clean, sustainable environment. And that's significant because that wasn't just recognised in the opening paragraphs, in the preambular paragraphs, but also in the operative paragraphs, which means that we don't just need to lightly recognise health when we're thinking about just transitions, we actually have to do something about health as we're implementing those just transitions. The decision also talks about the care economy, so good entry point there for healthcare and for social protection, which is of course also super relevant for health. And then there are mentions of health in relation to clean cooking, which is a really good entry point for us because when some countries talk about clean cooking, they actually mean the expansion of long-standing gas infrastructure, when a better option for many communities might be local renewable energy infrastructure. Local renewable energy grids, rather. And on the links between health and low carbon technologies, this is a great excuse to be pushing back on carbon capture and storage, which doesn't work at the scale needed to prevent climate change. But even if it did, it wouldn't prevent the health harms of fossil fuel extraction and production and processing. So recalling that paragraph is a great option for that. More broadly relevant than those health specific points, but definitely with implications for health, there was a decision to develop a just transition mechanism, which will support the implementation of a lot of just transitions. But there was quite limited information on how that mechanism is going to be resourced, so all TBC. And then finally, from me on finance, I talked about at the start how the finance outcome from COP29 wasn't sufficient to support ambitious and health protecting climate action. There, in that COP29 decision, was a mandate for the COP29 and the COP30 presidency to come up with a roadmap for how we were going to get to from the 300 billion to the 1.3 trillion. Um, but in the roadmap that was eventually produced by those two presidencies, there's a really heavy focus on private finance, which doesn't serve health in that it's based on loans most commonly. There's no accountability framework for the private sector under the Paris Agreement. And we also know that loans exacerbate cycles of debt and poverty and disease, and that the poorest countries in the world are already spending more on debt service than they are on healthcare and education and infrastructure combined. In sort of pushback and response to that, although they have been calling for it for a while, there were a group of developing countries that really returned to the core climate finance content of the Paris Agreement, which is in Article 9, and particularly on Article 9.1, which is about the obligations of developed countries to developing countries. And in that Mutarao decision that I mentioned earlier, there is a decision to have a 2-year program on public climate finance. And meanwhile, developed countries would rather think about how we expand the contributor base. How do we get more countries contributing to that public climate finance? So it's not just developed to developing countries can also contribute. And they'd much rather talk about wider financial flows, including Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement. And they managed to get through a dialogue on that. Um, Another finance-related discussion is on Article 9.5 of the Paris Agreement, which is on developed country planning for how much finance they plan to allocate. And those reports are due to be produced every 2 years, those forecasting reports, rather. And there are some potential improvements in how that's done, but it's not as substantive as some of the climate finance community would have hoped. And then finally, on the global goal on adaptation, the text did include a commitment to triple adaptation finance by 2035, which was a strong ask from least developed countries and then backed by AOSIS and others. And they had asked for that by 2030. They got it by 2035, but they had been asking for a baseline of what we should have reached by 2025, and there's no baseline reflected in the COP decision, and which means everything is, yeah, again, a lack of accountability where it's really needed. And that's it from me. Thanks so much again, and happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you very much, Jess, for the complete overview on what's happened in Belém. It's been, I can say, intense and also a lot of things. Despite, as you say, the cover decision, the multi-row was a little bit, we can say, not so ambitious as expected. But in terms of health, we have the Belém Action Plan, and also adaptation has been has get interesting evolution. Before going to the next speaker, I will ask if there are some questions and comment for Jess. Also, we'll add interesting that there is a definition of economy of care. In the OneHealth conference this year, we focused on the idea of integral ecology, that implies also this idea of the economy of care. So interesting also to notice that this has been entered into the wording of the say, decision in Belém. Okay. I don't know if there are questions. In case you can also uh, like write into the chat and eventually ask Jess in a written form. Let's go now to the next speaker, that is Nidhi Naga Abatla from UNUCRIS. Nidhi has been also one of the speakers of the International One Health Conference, but also organizer of different events and side events dealing with the connection between One Health, food system, and so on. So, Nidhi, you were also there. Give you the floor to report your point of view on what's happening in Belém. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Domenico, and thanks, Jav, for giving us an overview. I'm sorry, I'm just doing a winter school to give a capacity building exercise for 40 young participants in India on giving them some insights of what we learned at COP so they feel motivated in designing their research. Some on travel, so just using only audio and video to give the message and no slides. but I'll maybe make some couple of points that I think since many of these strategic points were already raised by or reflected by Jess in her slides, I'll just maybe come to what lies ahead in terms of actors, agencies, role, responsibility, and rights. I think the diversification of the finance story is both hopeful and challenging at a sectoral level, but we also need to see if we can have frameworks, approaches like One Health, planetary health, and more emphasis beyond the physical health. And I'm mostly talking from the climate health nexus perspective. And we have been, for the past 5 years at the COPs, trying to pitch for more focus on mental health and psychosocial well-being. So we'll be interested to see how this becomes reflected in different implementation plans and financial, technical, and human capacity mobilizing strategies in terms of advocacy, outreach, and capacity building. So that's our point number one, to ensure mental health and psychosocial well-being figures out and is integrated across. The second point I'd like to make is, I think, integral ecology position paper that Domenico and I launched with other delegates at the event. If we can have a bit of a dissemination event on that, and maybe we can motivate our network members to integrate some of the recommendations from that in their research projects, if they are in the scholarly domain, or if they are they are practitioners or from other agencies, maybe try to pick up some recommendations and see how we can have a follow-up in the next COP in Turkey and see what has been achieved a bit more towards our set of recommendations. And we understand there are many, many other sets of recommendations, but just to give us a bit of an anchoring point. My point number 3, which I like to also emphasize, is that we have to take our own effort in whatever capacity we can to see that the global knowledge is bridged with local actors and agencies. And that's the reason we have taken this winter school, and we have mobilized funding to reflect on some of the COP learnings, specifically around certain topics like nature-based solutions, disaster and well-being, how this is integrated in the climate action planning and discourse, with 40 plus young participants working in different fields and from different disciplines that related to climate in some context in India. And I think such efforts can be made across countries, so that these are cascading impacts. So I think these 40 will become our champions to then talk about it in their class, in their university, or in their workplaces. So sort of having that kind of a snowballing effect in communicating and disseminating information at all scales. And so number 4th point I'd like to emphasize is that the health discourse remains sometimes under-reflected in many documentation, or just mentioned for the sake of tick box. And I think our constant effort as an alliance, like Jess is representing, and we are also a part of that, or maybe through integral ecology frameworks or the other planetary health frameworks, I think we need to just keep pushing the agenda. From our side, as United Nations agency focusing on research capacity and the policy space, we encourage young people to approach us, to work with us, and taking forward this agenda in terms of producing more evidence, data, information, and knowledge. My closing point, and this 5th point, I'll really like to see that we are able to form some very specific working groups around topics that have not been given enough emphasis also within the health domain. I mean, some of our research focus in the past few years has been on how the disability and elderly people, or very young vulnerable groups, maybe infants rather, and I think we have been impacted by heat impact. And I'll just pick up a very nuanced topic here, and especially for the elderly or people who are working in certain sectors like infrastructure, and we are trying to have a global stock take of best practices across geographies, across nations, on how these mitigation impacts are being put into place. What kind of financial pledges or technical innovations are out there? Can AI bring some solutions in mapping heat hotspots? So we are just focusing on heat for this year, to have a more nuanced argument and discourse in Turkey. And we like to call for the support of all members across all alliances Domenico, your network, and happy to work on this together and have an argument that can maybe lead into some kind of a policy or point integration, starting with point integration to then policy design or support systems. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. And please let's follow up also on this last element that you mentioned. Very glad to also engage the International One Health Conference community. And thank you also for pointing out the role of, you say, disaster risk reduction and all things related also, as I say, to adaptation. That is something that we can also consider as one of the topics for the next conference. Now, I don't know if there are questions or comments for Nidhi. Even though I just remind that the session will be recorded and shared also into the chat and by email in case there are further, let's say, interaction. We can make it or by chat or by email. And I give the floor now to Ornella Punzo. Hi, Ornella. Ornella Punzo is from Istituto Superiore della Sanità, was there also as an observer, also participating to the health working group discussion and activities. So thank you very much, Ornella, for being with us. The floor to you.
Hi, everybody. So to be honest, I was party overflow. So because I was with the Italian delegations, I am in another capacity. I was in another capacity there. So it gives me another perspective, certainly different from the others that spoke before me. And especially I will have no slides, and actually I will give only my impressions of the COP. Especially because I find myself, it's a second COP I joined, and I realized that there is an entire group of people that actually are COP experts. So it's actually very difficult to orientate yourself into what's going on at COP if you're not part of them. And I'm certainly not, although I'm a researcher, I'm a senior researcher at Istituto Superiore di Sanità. And we were there to present our on-site event at the Health Pavilion at WHO, which actually degenerated as well because there was the fire that erupted, and our event was stopped like 5 minutes in. So we were there, actually, I will start from here. We were there since we work on health system decarbonization and climate resilient and achieving net zero health systems. We were going to present an event that was actually focused on this. And we invited speakers from Greener NHS, Healthcare Without Harm, a local health authority from Ausla Romagna in the north of Italy that organized with us the event. And so we are actually meaning to propose the event later, like at the beginning of next year with WHO again, because we weren't able to present anything at COP. So I would just give my impressions, as I said, and actually I think that as a researcher, I find myself in a very strange position because as a witness to COP, I find that even if I'm a researcher that works in this field, I find myself in a very strange position towards what actually goes on at COP and at policy and politics level, and what actually you research and work on, because sometimes, very often, these paths are quite divergent. And also I find that COP is a very peculiar conference, and as and health, I find myself as a member of the public when I participate to COP, and I find as my second COP very weird that, for example, as also WHO says, the role of health in COP is something that has to be very much stressed, and it isn't, and actually any achievement on the presence of health in any decision or document or agenda at COP, it's a great outcome. And as a physician with a clinical background that now works in public health, it's something very weird to me, certainly explained by the history of COP and UNFCCC, but the focus on environment and the shift towards including human health in this narrative and discourse, it's something really interesting to me, also thinking about broader policy. Also, I'm in a very strange position because we are active in this field, but Italy is not a signatory neither of the Belém Health Action Plan nor the ATASH. It's very weird that at the same time we are active in this and we are very committed on this topic, but we're not part of an alliance for the Alliance for Transformative Action in on Climate and Health that has 100 countries as members. At the same time, I find also that the COP experts, as I define them, are not so, are disappointed, but not so much. They can find good signs in the final Mutirao or other documents, decisions. But as member of the public, I found it very disappointing that what was promised at the beginning wasn't actually really delivered at the end of COP. And I found, although the agreement between the Netherlands and Colombia to organize the first conference on the phase out of fossil fuels in Colombia next April, it's something that certainly hinders the credibility and power of the COP negotiations. I think it's a very positive and optimistic sign for the future because at least something at other levels is moving, even if in the final documents at COP, the phase out from fossil fuels is not even mentioned. And then, some broader and not very elaborated thoughts about what I read and what I witnessed about the clash, not only between who produces oil and so defends fossil fuels, such as the Arab countries and Russia and so on, but also a clash between the global north, such as the EU, etc., and the global south in determining how much money we can put in assuring that other countries can actually implement adaptation and mitigation policies. And this is, I know that might sound very basic and very like observer type of reflections, but this is, I think, what someone coming not as an expert to COP can make out of COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ornella. And actually, I think that you touch a lot of, hot topics. And I'm glad that you reported your experience because also as a health researcher and health professional, we can really resound in a lot of your words. Also, especially the last one that you said. Actually, yes. Since few COPs, I had the opportunity also with other colleagues to attend other COPs. Is like there is like a sort of contraposition between two blocks, and this is something that also we can evidence thinking about the multilateralism. You touched the point of the role of COPs and how to see the role of COPs with this new conference. Actually, one comment that I want to share resounding your talks. For sure, from Belém, we can see that we can sure be not so disappointed, even though, as you said, we didn't have what we expected. But the multilateralism is surely not passing a good time, and we have to think about also on how to shape and reshape the multilateralism to have effective solution and effective decision. Is a topic that goes beyond health, of course, but as a researcher also, I think that we can surely observe these processes. So thank you very much for your sharing that I found very interesting and triggering. And also as Italian researcher, I think that we have to push more to bring our government to be part of ambitious alliance. I don't know if there are questions or comment or interaction with Ornella. Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank Ornella because and sorry, I didn't know that it was party overflow. So I've been a little bit naive in defining your role at COP. But thank you, and I'm glad that first of all you participated to the International One Health Conference, and we had the opportunity also to see at COP and to exchange some point of views. If there are no questions or comments for Ornella, we have our last speaker for the panel. That is Gokul Rajendran. Gokul Rajendran is a researcher in indigenous medicine and indigenous knowledge. Gokul participated also at the International One Health Conference and was present in COP. COP particularly important for indigenous communities because we were in the front of the Amazon. A lot of indigenous were there. A lot of indigenous has like felt their presence since the first day. So it was kind of an indigenous COP question mark. The answer to you, Gokul.
Hi, Domenico. Hi, everyone. Hi, Jess. Hi, Ornella. Hi, Nidhi. Nice to see you all guys here. So I just arrived today back to India after COP. I didn't have any time to like create a speech or something, but just I'll speak something like from my heart. So yeah, just to say like Ornella told, I was also like a party overflow of Ukraine, and yeah, so I was not able to go to negotiations too much because I was like working full time for a pavilion as well. So that was funding me to be at COP. So yeah, it was like not able to be actively involved in the COP processes and follow the negotiations around. But yeah, we were like having like free times, and which we mainly pushed forward for our action plans for traditional medicine for climate action. So for me, yeah, it was a traditional medicine co-op. Yeah, it is okay. It's like we have seen a lot of traditional medicine people being there, but it was mostly from Brazil itself, but not from other parts of the country world. So that was something like not seen at the space. And then to be like some of the main things was as like other countries like Bolivia, Chile, those countries were like indigenous people from those countries were also facing difficulty reaching the COP. So that was something like I wanted to mention because people are saying it was indigenous COP and there was a lot of indigenous people. Okay, but the indigenous communities it is like a vast community. So it's like it is like there's a lot of communities, like different communities each having different kind of health practices, and yeah, it is there. And I felt a little bit there was representation of indigenous people, but I don't know how meaningful it was. That was something really, like, people were there taking pictures with the indigenous people saying that it is an indigenous crop, but how much input was taken from there and all that stuff is like still. And yeah, it was nice to see the text having that indigenous knowledge should be taken into consideration. And yeah, that was something really really important to see. So that includes indigenous traditional knowledge for climate and health resilience and all of that stuff. So that was a really good step going forward. you tell us about the strength in the statement that it was not an indigenous COP? Indigenous communities breaking in the venue. Could this strengthen your state?
Yeah, you can conclude, Gokul, then we
Yeah.
can answer to the
Okay,
question.
Melissa.
So,
Okay, perfect. So from my side, it's like good. And then going forward, like we had like our initiatives that we were pushing forward. So the meaningful thing is like how it should be taken now is the main thing. So we have the text saying that inclusion of indigenous and traditional knowledge should be done. But how is the main part next, which is going to be coming? Sorry. So that is something really the next steps I think we need to take going forward. Uh, uh, yeah, other than that, it was a really nice COP, and I really think for health perspective from the indigenous side, it is like really good that it has been included in the text, and the going forward the gaps can be closed, I think so. And we have been working on that. So we have some updates like we have been in touch with the UNFCC secretary and all of other some of the partners. So it is not completely sure what will happen from this COP to the next COP, but still we are pushing forward. We have some green signals, green lights and stuff now. So it actually, to be honestly, to say like I have never got us a time to prepare a speech or something yet. Sorry. So not yet. So I just arrived today, so I need to like work on making what is the next steps should be taken going forward and everything. But still, sorry, just a minute. I just need to. Okay, perfect. Uh, so that was something I would like to say. And going forward, we have like the plans made with the UNSC secretariat, like how can we include health in the traditional medicinal knowledge in the health part, so that it can be inclusive enough to like meaningfully engage the indigenous communities getting there. So that was something like missing as well. So yeah, hopefully next COP will have like much more. And yeah, that's it, Dominica, I think. Thank you.
thank you very much, Gokul. Thank you also for bringing your point of view. And yeah, it was interesting also to see this dimension of the indigenous medicine, indigenous knowledge, because as I said, we were like in the front of the Amazon. Let's take the question from Melissa. Could you tell about indigenous communities breaking in the venue? All this strengthened your statement. It was like not a religious scope.
Mm.
Interesting point.
It is interesting point because most of the indigenous communities who came were speaking their own native language like Spanish, French. It was a little bit difficult to talk to them, but still, it was difficult to talk to the people who came from indigenous communities. But I don't know how they were like able to engage and create a change. That was something I need to talk to the people right now. I have to have met at COP and get more inputs that I have not done yet. So I need to go for next steps from here. But after COP, I went to Bolivia. I went to Bolivia. I talked to indigenous communities over there, and some of the people told me like they were not able to reach because of the funding issues for them. So I was like worried, like even for a current country like Bolivia, which is like very near to Brazil, they couldn't make it there. So how has the other people from like indigenous communities from the Australia, Canada, like other region from India has been able to make it over there? So that was something like really we need to look into more deeply. But it was an indigenous COP because most of the people there was indigenous people. There was a lot of indigenous communities participating. Uh, it's a mix. I don't have an answer right now to reply to that question yet, Lisa. Sorry for that, but still, it was. I'm sure that it was an indigenous COP. I said it like it had the texts, which is a big thing for the going forward. It's like saying that traditional knowledge should be included in the processes. Uh, yeah.
If I can add
Yeah,
on this,
please,
Gokul.
please go ahead. Please go
Yeah.
ahead. Yes, you can just comment.
So for sure, of course, engagement, can be also being always improved, especially we say the accessibility of the not only the venue but also the location. That was one a big deal for all the delegates and so on. But we can say that at the end, making a sum on what has been achieved, not also in terms of indigenous communities, um, they let feel their presence since the first day, and also the breakout was a way to them to show that they were there. Okay, and this has been also reflected into the diplomacy of the indigenous people. And I say that because one of the days that of the last week or the second week, there was also Sonia Guajajara, that is like the Ministry for Indigenous People of the government of Brazil, that has been quite able to exploit the COP conference to also resolve some internal political issues. There was like a big issue with indigenous people, with the government of Brazil regarding the lands dedicated, like the government of Brazil will lend to indigenous communities. There was a strong say political conflict on that. So even the first day, the very reason behind was the discussion of this internal thing. Okay. But after COP, we came out that the diplomacy of the of Sonia Guajajara and not only, of course, has led the government of Brazil to concess even 10 new lands to the indigenous people. And so this is like, of course, everything is perfectible, everything can be done better and so on, but it's a result, okay?
Hey, Domenico, I would like
Yeah.
to ask you one more question because I was not able to observe it too much because I was trapped with like I was with the pavilion doing a
Uh,
work. So how was the WHO working with the indigenous and traditional medicine at COP, like the pavilion spaces and other foundations like Welcome Trust and everything, who is like working on health and climate? So were they engaging with the indigenous people over there? I was like not sure if anyone as a speaker who was there could like enlighten me on that part. It will be like really amazing, please.
Okay, so Gokul was asking if somebody from WHO or like if you have the hint on how WHO engage also with indigenous community, that there was like some interaction and so on and so forth.
Mhm. Or any other foundation like Welcome Trust or anything like that
Mhm.
who happened with indigenous health in the COP. Yeah. Just because I was like not able to be a lot of places at that place sort. Yeah.
Yeah, and also to concur with Jen, with Jess, the badge thing was an issue also. Yes, for sure. Uh, Actually, as Ornella has pointed out, logistically there should be like many rooms of improvement for this scope, included the badge allocation for indigenous people and so on. Okay,
Uh,
Melissa, I don't know if you want to speak out. I saw that you write in the chat, and then we are gonna close.
Yes,
so
sorry. I
Yeah.
completely forgot that I have the mic. I'm sorry. Um, yeah, I was following COP online, and that's why I do not get this perspective. As you guys know, I have been to other conference of the parties before in presence, and I've noticed sometimes reluctancy from the security guards, of course, for whoever has a badge or not. And I also read about this break into the venue from indigenous communities, asking to be heard, asking to be a part of the negotiations, part of the processes. But again, from the perspective of the news, from the perspective of the media. This was portrayed as no, they broke in because they were not heard. And that's why I'm asking about what you saw in the venue, in the place. But from what I read from Jess, thank you, Jess, the Global Climate Health Alliance was able to support one Indigenous person for a batch, which is amazing. We need to start somewhere. But I have always believed that these conferences, while they have to do this filtering of people who gets in, who doesn't get in, I also wonder why there were so many fossil fuel lobbyists inside with a badge and lots of indigenous people being attacked by these fossil fuel industries outside without having a voice there. It's just my thoughts out loud. Thank you. And thank you guys for informing us.
Thank you, Melissa. I don't know if there is somebody that wants to react to Melissa.
I think, yeah, I can go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, the things like the people trying to get in was like too much dramatic because people are like, the security guard would run for your life. Like, if you go this way, you'll be dying. People are like pushing inside and killing people. Like, that was the situation. And everyone was like so scared. But it was like not too much chaotic, I think so. Because no one was harmed and just people wanted to come in. That was the main thing. But at the venue, it was like really chaotic. Like, people are trying to kill people inside COP. That was kind of situation. People are spreading the news and everything. So but yeah, I think that was really one of the main cases because mostly we need like funding to reach all these places, and fossil fuel people has a lot. So that's the main thing that they are able to be at these places. And yeah, main thing is that I think so mostly. And if we within in the region itself in sorry, in like South America, it's like really hard to travel around like for the flights and everything is like expensive as well for internal travels as well. So basically that I think to add more. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gokul. So, if there are no other questions or comments, which I ask for, maybe we can close the session. Thanking very much the
One
speakers. Yeah.
the question I asked about like the WHOs and indigenous people at the space. So any
uh,
comments on that will be like really helpful for me. Yep.
So Jess was saying that GCHA has like supported some indigenous people with a badge for a couple of days. So I think that, but I think that there was also some side events for that. Uh, and I'm not sure because, of course, I didn't have now the full calendar of the events of the of WHO. But just to share my opinion, I also in terms of visibility, as I said, uh, mm, after the COP, I saw that lot of studies, lot of even initiative on indigenous medicine has rise up properly on the using the momentum of COP. Even some of our colleagues, Jordi Serrano Pons, Xavier Valbuena, that also participated to One Health, presented after COP some initiative. For sure, there was an attention, okay? For sure, need to be more attention, and I agree. But as for the result of Belém, if I just can share my point of view, the Belém was not ambitious as expected, and also as the presidency has presented, because it was claimed as the COP of implementation. Finally, we will regain momentum after Paris and so on. Has been nothing at all of this. But uh, even from a point of view of Arnella was mentioning before, experts of COP and so on. So if you go deep on the result, you will find some hooks, some points in that need to be developed, but that can be there. Even the conference in Colombia is for sure a strange thing that come out from COP. but maybe can be interesting. Okay, maybe you can run some side project or side activity that can help the negotiation that, as I said, in my opinion, are not passing a good moment in general term for the geopolitical scenario for everything. So multilateralism need to be supported in a way. Belém is giving a lot of open question marks. Okay, uh, in a way is ambiguous, but ambiguous can be ambiguous in a positive thing or a negative thing. Depends on how the thing are rolling up and are like developing in the future. That's my main take home from Belém. Of course, let's see. Now, next COP will be in Turkey, will be co-hosted by Turkey and Australia. Let's see, but a lot of Belém need to be done in the middle of the two COPs, not just waiting the last COP, the next COP, because even though it will be like wasted time and so on. That's my opinion. Okay, I don't know if there are other comments, questions. So,
I think I would like to add one more thing. So we
yeah,
launched
yeah.
our traditional medicine app. So it's like a social media app for biodiversity at COP30. So it was like significant like a big milestone for us as traditional medicine. So it's like we collect information about how people are using like medicinal plants, indigenous knowledge about biodiversity. How is people linking into biodiversity and helping one community learn about the other community. And globally it's a global repository of traditional knowledge, and also like it helps countries transfer information about if you're having a plant in Italy, how is the same plant being used in some other country. And also the research on how climate change is, like how the different climate how the different climates are impacting the chemical structure of the plant, like how the medicinal property changes and all that stuff. So we are working on the app to make it more better and things. So it was launched. I have just shared this. So that was one of the other main milestone that we had at COP30. Yep, perfect.
Thank you, cool. Thank you very much also to the other speakers. Now we will close the session. As I said, we will put our recording also on the YouTube channel of the International One Health Conference. Also, just to I take this chance to say that we are working also for all the outputs of the conference in Rome. We launched the position paper. Now we're working on the proceedings and also on the recordings. And also we are planning to organize the One Health 2026. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for attending here, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.